morning. Are we good? Oh, good. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the SCR Update, your go-to source for what's happening in the world of real estate and how it impacts you and your business. This is episode 383, and today is January 27th, 2026. And as always, I'm your real estate influencer and host, Nick Kromitis, CEO, South Carolina Realtors. We are off our normal Monday schedule today. Yesterday we had, or we're expecting a snow day here in Columbia. Didn't quite get the snow, but we certainly got the cold weather, right, Mike? On the control board today, I also want to make an introduction. Tyler Tipton is our newest staff member here at SCR, our communication and video specialist. Did I get that right? Video and communication specialist. I got it right the second time. Thanks, Tyler, and thanks for your help today. Mike, always thank you for your assistance in getting the program together. Fortunately, South Carolina did not see the big impact from the storms, at least not as bad as we've seen in other states. Our friends, I saw some news reports from Tennessee and Kentucky where thousands are still without power. I hope, I know Oconee, Pickens County, the upstate corner, up into Greenville, maybe even into Cherokee, we have some loss of power. I am hopeful that has all been restored by today. Certainly the weather would not, you wouldn't think that there was any snow based on the weather here in Columbia. Everything's dry, a little cold. I still got my jacket on. It's cold back here in the studio today. So grab your coffee and let's jump right in. We've got a few updates for you this week. First, let's start with an important update straight from SCR. The SCR Board of Directors met yesterday and discussed, debated, and reviewed changes to the SCR Forms library. We're going to have a big forms announcement that we're going to launch on February the 11th. We've got a scheduled broker webinar for 2 p.m. that day, and we'll be reviewing the changes to the forms then. And Realtors, we've scheduled 2 town hall meetings, one for February the 18th at 2 p.m. and the other on February 27th at 2 p.m. And this will be an all-member access webinar where our legal team will review the forms changes and go through those so that you can be informed and have all the latest information. So in addition to the broker in charge announcement that we're making on February the 11th, we've got these 2 additional town halls to communicate all the changes to you and our members across the state. Please check your emails in the coming weeks so that you can register and get the latest changes so you know what to expect on updates to your SCR forms. So now let's head down to the State House for a quick update. I want to make sure that you are watching your weekly legislative roundup from our Chief Advocacy Officer, Lindsay Hutto. She publishes a video newsletter every Friday afternoon during session, and make sure that you are receiving those emails. If you're not, please let me or email Mike directly, and we can make sure that you're on that list. First up, insurance reform. The LCI, Banking and Insurance Subcommittee, that's Labor, Commerce, and Industry, they met again this week to dig into House Bill 4817. This bill is known as the Insurance Rate Reduction and Policy Holder Protection Act. They love to give bills long titles and catchy. Now, I don't know how catchy that name is, but it sounds like it's going in the right idea. We all know that premiums are a pain point right now for homeowners. This bill is the legislature's attempt to lower costs and ramp up consumer protections through tighter oversight of the insurance industry. The subcommittee heard testimony from the insurance industry side this week, basically getting the carrier side of the story. No votes are taken yet, but this is one that we are watching very closely as it moves forward, as insurance issues are going to become more and more a part of the homeownership picture in South Carolina as we go forward. So next up is a big update on income taxes. The Senate Finance Committee this week, or last week, I should say, started their work on H 4216. And this is an income tax reform plan that's already passed the House. And here's the headline that you've probably seen in our local media outlets. South Carolina looks to be moving toward a flat income tax. The current plan would set an initial flat rate of 3.99% with economic triggers in place that would eventually drive that rate down to 2.49% or even zero, depending on how fast state revenues grow in the coming years. The bill also simplifies things by shifting South Carolina's tax base from federal taxable income to federal adjusted gross income. Now, the committee gave this a favorable report, so it heads to the Senate floor. Expect some amendments. We always can expect amendments, but the momentum is definitely shifting toward lower income taxes for South Carolinians. Third, I think this is going to be a major win for seniors. It's still got a little bit of work ahead of it, but the Senate Finance Committee also gave a thumbs up to Senate Bill 768. Now, this is a bill regarding homestead exemptions. We talked about this a little bit last time. There was some back and forth on the age requirement, but the version that's leaving committee keeps the eligibility age at 65. However, here's the big change from what we talked about last time. Instead of increasing the exemption from 50 to 100, the committee passed an amendment that would increase the exemption from $50,000 to $150,000. That is a massive jump that will provide real relief to senior homeowners. The committee also discussed adding a 5-year residency requirement to qualify. So you just couldn't move here and immediately take advantage of the exemption. Now, one of the interesting comments that were made during the hearing, we want to attract seniors to South Carolina, and whether or not this residency requirement passes the final version, we'll just have to wait and see. This bill is headed to the full Senate. As I said, it's going to be on the floor, and it'll likely be discussed, amended. Is there a chance? I think there's a good chance that this gets passed out of the Senate and gets sent over to the House for review. And the final legislative issue, one thing, before I jump into that, Mike, let me tell you, the legislature the last few years has passed relatively few bills. I mean, extremely few bills. It's been hard to get anything out of the legislature, and that's a good and bad mix. But for the first 2 weeks of session, we've gotten out of the gates as fast as any recent session in memory. Lindsay Hutto and our team are doing an amazing job. And I wanted to touch on one final issue before we leave this topic, and this is one for property managers to watch. And this is a bill dealing with eviction expungement. Now, this is a bill that's moving through the legislature that would allow tenants to wipe their eviction records from their history. We are tracking Senate Bill 744. This is sponsored by Senator Russell Ott. It was introduced this session, and the proposal is pretty straightforward. If a tenant has an eviction on their record but goes 5 years without any new eviction filings, they can apply to the magistrate court to have their old record expunged. There's also a House version of this bill, 4270, House Bill 4270, which goes a step further. It would automatically seal eviction filings that don't result in an actual eviction order after 30 days. Now, why does this matter? For tenants, it's about a fresh start. For landlords and property managers, this changes how far back you can see into an applicant's rental history. Pros and cons on both sides, right? Definitely things that we're going to be weighing as we see these bills move their way through the judiciary committees in both bodies, and we'll keep you posted. What we like to say, I don't know if this is a State House term or not, or if it's just something I made up. We kind of watch to see whether these bills have legs, whether they have any momentum, whether, they're actually just sitting in committee or actually moving in committee. Now, these bills currently are just sitting in committee. And if they get legs, if they get some momentum, we definitely will keep you up to date on that. So now let's look at a little bit more of a national landscape, Mike. Now, realtors, if you caught the headlines from the LA Times this week, and I know that we all read the LA Times, right? Mike, that's at the top. That's at the top of my reading list. But you know that housing affordability is, or has become, the word of the year in Washington. Both parties agree that the system is strained. Some would say it's broken, but they have very different ideas on how to fix it. Now, I want to give you a quick breakdown on the different paths, the different approaches to fixing housing. On the Republican side, the focus is heavily on supply-side deregulation. GOP leaders are pushing to slash federal regulations that add to the cost of construction, things like energy mandates and zoning restrictions, etc. They're also floating a controversial idea to open up federal lands for housing development. The argument is that the government owns too much land, and releasing some of it could flood the market with cheap dirt for builders. You know, also don't forget that the president last week actually signed an executive order aimed at stopping large institutional investors, these Wall Street hedge funds, from buying up single-family homes, a move designed to leave more inventory for mom and pop buyers. Well, on the Democrat side of the aisle, the focus is on demand-side support and trying to supercharge construction. Senate Democrats are pushing for a bill called the Down Payment Toward Equity Act, which would offer up to $25,000 in grants for first-generation home buyers. They're also talking about using the Defense Production Act to fix supply chains for building materials, basically treating the housing shortage like a national emergency. That's my cousin is calling me because he's upset that I can't go duck hunting with him this weekend. I think I'll send that call to voicemail. Sorry, Jimmy. You know, their plan also includes strong incentives for local governments to fix their own zoning laws to allow for more density. That also is going to be pretty controversial. You know, this has been tried in many communities around the country where, you know, do you want to allow multi-use, multifamily development in single-use, single-family development? This is going to pit neighbor versus neighbor in many communities. So the takeaway for you realtors, you know, whether whether you support any of these proposals, the fact that both sides of the aisle are finally focusing on housing and finally admitting that we have a crisis in housing is a huge, huge step forward. Housing has not been part of the national conversation probably since, I don't know, the GI plan after World War II. So keep an eye on that investor ban and what immediate impacts that might have on local listings this spring. And we'll continue to manage and share updates as they come forward. So, Mike, I think it's time for our Don't Do That segment. All right, welcome to Don't Do That, where we highlight the common mistakes, ethical slip-ups, and risky business practices that you need to avoid. From compliance headaches to client horror stories, we're here to help keep you out of hot water. So let's dive in. I think I've got a couple of topics here today. We've got a bonus Don't Do That, Mike, I think. So first, let's talk about a familiar topic, these fake seller scams, these that generally involve vacant, undeveloped land. And this is where a scammer poses as the owner of a vacant lot, finds a realtor online, and tries to list the property quickly, usually for an all-cash deal. Red flags, right? Red flags all across the board. You know, if they communicate by email or text only, claim to be traveling or unavailable, I'm using air quotes for y'all that are just listening to the audio here, you know, and are trying to pressure you for a quick sale, make sure you verify their identity. Use forewarn, use your member service. Send a letter to the tax address on file. Independently find their number and the owner's number and call them. Do not let your license get used to sell a property that the seller doesn't even own. Realtors, don't fall for fake seller land scams. Don't do that. I also want to remind realtors to avoid being a DIY attorney. Now here's what I mean. DIY, of course, is do it yourself, right? Agents often try to be helpful by writing or thinking that they want to write their own contract language when standard forms don't quite fit. You know, you've got a tricky situation. Maybe the seller needs to rent back for 3 days, or a buyer wants to trade their boat for the down payment. Does that actually happen, Mike? I guess it could. I guess you could trade anything, Bitcoin or anything else these days, right? You know, so what does the agent want to do? They want to open the contract and start typing, right? To create a custom paragraph to explain the deal. Don't do that, realtors. Number one, you're not a realtor. When you draft custom legal language, you are engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. That's UPL for short. Violations of UPL carry civil and criminal penalties. Let me say that again. Violations of UPL carry civil and criminal penalties. Not to mention that if this clause causes the deal to fall apart because it's poorly written, vague, or has other problems on it, guess what? Guess who's going to be on the hook? You, 100%. In addition to the violations of UPL. So, realtors, stick to the standard SCR forms. If it's weird, if you're dealing with a weird situation, call the legal hotline, call your broker in charge, get your company attorney involved, and protect yourself, protect your clients. So realtors, don't act as a DIY attorney. Just don't do that. So realtors, we're wrapping things up today. I want to remind you of our Capital Conference that's coming up on March 3rd, the 4th. We've also scheduled a couple of town hall meetings that I mentioned earlier to discuss upcoming changes to the SCR forms, and encourage you all to participate and share those links with your colleagues. Mike, I think that's all we've got for today. That was a lot to cover. Thank y'all for tuning in. I hope y'all stay safe, stay warm, and of course, stay realtor strong, and we'll see you again next week. Take care, everyone.